Ooh, wasabi guys. Ooh, we're getting a little spooky here. Top 10 vampire cards in the Commander format. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little buzzed right now, but I should be sober enough to get this done here, so let's go ahead and do it. Just keep in mind here that these are vampire cards. These are not necessarily artifacts or enchantments or any other cards. These are mainly creatures that are vampires, not non-creature vampire associated cards, so please keep that in mind here. And this has nothing to do with Soren Markov. He is not a creature, he is a planeswalker. At least the cards that we have of him so far are only planeswalker cards. So these are all vampire creature cards here. Number 10, we have Olivia Mobilized for War. Now, when she was originally spoiled, a lot of people were like, oh wow, cool, vampires and the whole madness mechanic is going to work out really well. So far, hasn't really worked out too well, but I still think that she's a very good card in Commander, especially when you want to go more on the aggressive strategy with your vampire decks here, and the fact that she is Rakdos colors definitely makes it so that you're not just playing mono black, in addition to having the ability to trigger madness, and you have that synergy there. And there are some vampires from the Shadows block that did do pretty well with the whole madness trigger, so it has that going for it. And in addition, it's good aggression. You get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, it gains haste. A lot of vampires have synergies with +1/+1 counters, so you have that little thing there going for it too. Number 9 is Jaleva Nephalia Scourge. Now, very underrated commander option. Definitely better options when it comes to Grixis, but I still feel that she has her usefulness, and definitely in a control-based deck. Also good for Voltron. But honestly, the only thing that's keeping her down on this list would probably be the fact that she doesn't necessarily synergize that well with vampire strategies. You can definitely put vampires in her deck or whatever you want to, but she's just more tailored towards the Voltron style of play, where you're just going to be trying to, buff her up, make her as strong as you can, in addition to just manipulating what your opponents have exiled. Number 8 is Dark Impostor. Very cool that you have the whole pay 6 mana, exile a creature, get a +1/+1 counter on it, and it gains all activated abilities of that creature. Kind of like a Necrotic Ooze, but it does give you the option of exiling a creature. And the fact that it's also a vampire too. You don't always have the best removal when it comes to black. Black does exile creatures occasionally, so when you have this ability on a creature, it's very cool. And definitely having this versatility in the vampire tribe, it's not very common, so you take it when you can get it. And definitely Dark Impostor is not just one of the better vampire creatures that I have here on this list, but it's definitely one of the most underrated vampires. Number 7 is Turkana Revenant. Now, in addition to having that whole shade effect where you can just pump her up and get a ton of power off of her, you can also double your mana here. Downside is it's just black mana, so it's really just a 6 mana Crypt Gas when you think about it for a utility purpose. It's also a vampire too, so it does synergize with tribal themes, so definitely whenever you can pump up your mana, get a ton of it. You have more mana to spend, you have more mana to do with things, you cast your other vampire spells, whatever the hell you want to do with it, you have that option, and more mana equals more options, so can't go wrong with Turkana Revenant. Next we have number 6, Bloodline Keeper / Lord of Lineage. Now, very cool. You have a guy here that can tap to give you, flying vampires. That's awesome. You can then pay the black to transform him into Lord of Lineage, and they all get buffs. They all get +2/+2, and you could just tap them to start making more vampires. So, from a flavor standpoint, in terms of just vampires in general, Bloodline Keeper / Lord of Lineage is very cool. Definitely towards the top of the list when I'm thinking about making a vampire tribal deck, especially now that we have Edgar Markov heading the vampire deck for Commander 2017. It's definitely cool to have more of a tribal theme going for it, and Bloodline Keeper definitely helps out when you look at the tribal flavors. Number 5, I have Yahenni Undying Partisan. Now, we're going to be looking at vampires for more of a utility purpose, and I definitely feel that Yahenni serves 2 purposes. He's a very good attacker, he's a very good blocker. You can just sacrifice a creature, make him indestructible, But whenever a creature your opponents control, whenever they die, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as the game goes on. And if you have a Wrath effect, all it really takes is you sacrificing another creature. He gains indestructible, and he just gets a ton of +1/+1 counters off your opponent's creatures, and he's just massive. You know, he does have haste too, which is really cool. He gets out there, he can just start swinging. There's a ton of cool things, and flavor-wise, he's not your traditional vampire. The Aetherborn are not traditional vampires at all. So definitely cool when you have sort of a blanket term that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have fangs to be considered vampires too. So it's really cool to see this, and for flavor purposes, kind of cool to go out there in more of the abstract thought process when it comes to creating new vampires as well. Really cool card, definitely love him. He's a decent commander option as well. Number 4 is Kalitas, Trader of Get. Very cool. Not just for Vampire Tribal, but really when it comes down to hate cards in general. Being able to hate on so many graveyard decks in this format. We're talking about the Marins, we're talking about Mimeoplasm, Sidisi. There's just a ton of options to choose from when it comes to graveyard-based decks. And even not just the graveyard-focused ones, but any deck that can reanimate or recur cards. Whenever you can exile the creature instead of having it go to the graveyard, and also get a token, that's crazy. Very underrated card when it comes to just thinking about utility and just thinking about how cool that is to exile a creature and not have to worry about it coming back. I mean, that's just incredible. And definitely when I think about vampires and just good utility, he's definitely one of the ones that comes to mind. Number 3, I have Butcher of Malachy. And it might be a surprise to you that he's this high up on the list, but it really shouldn't be, when you consider the fact that he is 7 mana, but he's also a flying body that's pretty competent on his own. In addition, you also have the Grave Pact on a creature here. So there's token decks that are considering playing him. You know, you have Marin decks that will consider playing him. You have a ton of options, whether it's just mono black or going outside of that range here. And even in Vampire Tribal, you still have a guy here that's going to help even the playing field. If one of your creatures dies, you know, each other player has to sacrifice a creature. That's just great. And Grave Pact abilities are very underrated and aren't played enough. I definitely feel like any deck that can play a Grave Pact effect should play it. Especially, I mean, obviously if you're playing tokens, it's even more important, and being able to take advantage of that. Number 2, I have Olivia Volta. Main reason why she's number 2 is for flavor and flavor. Definitely Rakdos vampires for a long time. She's been the head of tribal decks for a while. Very similar to Memnarch in sort of the abilities here. You get to ping a creature, it becomes a vampire, and then you get to then pay the 5 black mana to have it become your creature. When it comes to tribal, anything that can synergize and automatically make things vampires and help you gain control of them, that's very flavorful. Definitely cannot wait to see what they do with Edgar Markov, but she's, for me at least, an auto include in any tribal themed deck associated with vampires. Really cool. And even the ping ability, you can technically use that as removal as well, so it's really cool. And you also have the whole error there on her artwork, and it doesn't look right. I know it looks like she has a raging boner, but that's beside the point. She's just a great card here for Vampire Tribal, and really kind of expanded the whole, went off color there with red, definitely expanded your options, especially when it comes to Commander. Whenever you can venture out into multiple colors, it's going to give you a more versatile skill set here with your deck, and you're going to be able to deal with other problems because now you're playing red and you have artifact removal. You know, you have ways of dealing with non-creature permanents that you didn't necessarily have with black. In addition, you have, you know, red color vampires that are just cool as shit. Which leads us to number 1 here, and without a doubt, it's Blood Artist. I mean, it's played in so many decks. It's the most played vampire in the format, and it should be no surprise. It sits on the field. Whenever a creature dies, one player loses a life and you gain a life. It's so small, but yet it does so much. And in terms of just pure value, 2 mana for a creature that sits on the field and is likely not going to draw too much hate, because most people don't feel like wasting it. You know, oh, I don't want to lose a life if I don't have to. I don't want to have to do this. You know, it's painful to sort of rip off the band-aid and just deal with it immediately. So what a lot of players will do, they'll just let a blood artist sit on the field for a long time, and they won't address it soon enough until it's too late and they've already a net loss off of a blood artist 20 life. That's not unheard of, and it's definitely very common, and a lot of people do overlook blood artists when it comes to the removal game, and being able to deal with it early on, you have to, because it's so valuable. You know, gaining life in Commander is not always a big deal. Each time having that 2-point life swing between you and opponent, I mean, that's incredible. So not only are you going to be gaining a ton of life off of him, but you're going to be forcing your opponents to lose a lot of life too. So obviously you have the infinite combos in this format. Anything that can give you infinite sack triggers wins you the game with Blood Artist. So it's an easy combo piece as well. So it's just also insurance. It helps you grind out games. It's just an all-around great card, not just for Vampire Tribal, but for black decks in general. And a lot of black decks play Blood Artist for that exact reason. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this top 10 list of the best vampire cards in the Commander format. Let me know what your top 10 are. And let me know if you want me to continue this and do Dragon Tribal, Cat Tribal, Wizard Tribal, or Cleric Tribal, or whatever that deck's going to be. So let me know if you want me to do those. I will most certainly give it my best effort. So anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here, signing off.